I'm going to formally welcome everyone, introduce myself. My name is Melanie Ryan. I'm the CEO of Unearthodox, based out here in the UK. And I'd like to welcome you to this session, the first session of this learning festival. And it marks the first day of our month-long Unearthodox Learning Festival. We're actually really excited to have you join us on this journey. This idea has been some time in the development, and it's been really co-created with the innovators that have come through our work, with the teams, with the projects, and we hope that you'll all find it really inspiring, and it will help us to persist in our work as change makers and conservationists. So Unearthodox, if you don't know us, we're a young organization launched only in March 2023. Prior to this, we were known as the Luke Hoffman Institute, so with the 10 years of work before this. We focus on social innovation for biodiversity conservation, and we really look to challenge established problems, take a look at the world differently. We try to find this untapped potential in seeing the world differently and looking for solutions or new alternatives for these relationships between society and nature on Earth, and seeing how we can help to support and catalyze networks of people and individuals that results in innovation that brings us new solutions to long-standing problems. So we work around these principles of innovation, collaboration, co-creation, futures thinking, systems thinking, and we really, at the core of our work, we believe that it matters who comes together for these perspectives and ideas, who gets to have a say in what the future is, who gets to have a say in what innovation is. So that's part of our design and our process. We know through working with innovators around the world that we've witnessed this transformative power of innovation and action. And today, really, it's about showcasing some of these remarkable innovations that have the potential to inspire and catalyze positive change. This Learning Festival is bringing together Unearthodox's 3 current projects from the last 3 years. So the future of conservation NGOs, the future of philanthropy for biodiversity, and digital disruption, and the future of conservation. So throughout this month, we're going to hear from experts, thought leaders, and visionaries who are shaping the future of conservation. We're going to be engaging in hopefully lively discussions, brainstorming, discussion on solutions, and seeing how we can continue to foster innovation and collaboration that has the power to change the world. So, but before we dive into our first session, I'd like to just share quickly some housekeeping aspects that we saw in the chat box, and just remind anyone who's joined us new and who has just joined in the last few minutes. So this session is being recorded, and it will actually be up online in the next few days for sharing and circulation. Please use the chat box to share your LinkedIn profile if you would like to be connected with other people here from the network, these sorts of things. Throughout the session, please use the chat to ask questions. We can't promise that we'll get to all of them, because I can't anticipate right now how many questions will come through the chat box, but we'll really try to address them where we can. If we get several questions around the same issue, we might work to synthesize those and see where the main areas of question are going. But let's see how we go together. So that's some of the housekeeping for running the session together. So setting the scene, where have we come from? So in 2021, we initiated the Future of Conservation NGOs project with the goal of reimagining and reshaping the landscape of conservation efforts and identifying and testing novel models better equipped to foster just, inclusive, and regenerative futures. Okay, so the project sought to drive innovation and provide support for alternatives that proactively address the deep-rooted challenges confronting conservation non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, as we know them. So we initiated a process of reframing and thinking about these problems differently, thinking about the future differently, and what you might consider scaling deep. So looking at these elements that relate to paradigms, narratives, power, the flow of knowledge, the flow of decision-making, how we make these deep choices about the world we live in and other alternatives, and how does this relate to conservation NGOs? So we identified these 4 key themes that are really around these ideas of communication and narratives, operational and funding models, power and legacy, interdependence and inclusivity. Based on this co-creation process, where we've engaged more than 200 people directly, and then hundreds and hundreds more through social media and conversations and events like this, we published a situation analysis called Exploring Possible Futures for Conservation NGOs. And ourselves, as well as those that we've worked with, we've spent some time getting comfortable with important and sometimes uncomfortable conversations through these convenings, these events, these bilateral interviews, sharing the findings, sharing the work of the innovators. What I found personally, there is an appetite and there is space for these uncomfortable conversations. This is the direction that people want to move in. They want to challenge how we've been doing things in the past. So in April 2022, together with the IUCN Commission on Environment, Economic and Social Policy, and then with Impact Hub as well, and we have one of our Impact Hub colleagues here with us today, we ran an innovation challenge to surface innovative ideas that address these 4 thematic areas that we've just described. So today, we're going to introduce you to 4 of the winners of the Innovation Challenge. We'll begin to showcase how the innovations they are spearheading have the potential to spark transformative change in conservation, and how their ideas have systemic relevance. So systemic, deep-rooted relevance for anyone seeking a more just and regenerative future. I won't speak any further. The stars of the show are here from our Innovation Challenge, and I'm going to hand over to our Impact Hub colleague, Bruno, who's a global associate with Impact Hub and our valued Innovation Challenge partner. At Unearthodox, we have a principle of never do anything alone and don't take up the space of others. So we always partner out with those who are really working in their niche, credible, legitimate, bringing their strength to the partnership, and Impact Hub has been one of those people for us. So Bruno, I'd like to invite you to begin to share more about the challenge, introduce our winners, and guide us through this afternoon.
Great, thank you very much, Mel. Yeah, it's great to be here. And it was a real joy to work on this program as a representative of Impact Hub Global, who, among many other things, run innovation programs like this as part of our mission to create a more just, inclusive, and sustainable world. So we were helped to come in and help to run the competition and to widen the net of recruitment beyond the usual conservation audiences. So our dedicated scouting team at Impact Hub Amsterdam created a campaign which drew more than 100 recommendations of potential candidates from our impact hubs across the globe, such as in Harare, Medellin, Manila, Accra, and Dhaka. They contacted also over 150 more organizations, particularly focusing on those who might not normally think of themselves as working in conservation, but who nonetheless fulfilled our criteria. This was in addition to all the work being done by Unearthodox and IUCN CISP, who were recruiting more from within the conservation sector. There was a 13-member jury of practitioners and experts from across the conservation ecosystem, and they had no easy task reducing that 173 down to 9 winners. You can see the representation of the people of our 173 in the graph and in the chart that's on the screen there. Could I have the next slide, please? So in addition to the 4 participants of phase 2 who are here today, the other 5 participants from phase 1 demonstrate the geographic spread and organizational diversity of our winners. And I'll take an opportunity to talk about each of them in turn from right to left. Rewild DAO supports conservation projects to embrace the principles of DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations, in order to facilitate collective decision-making in a transparent, tailored, and non-hierarchical way. The Gabon Women's Platform seeks to empower rural women through documenting, managing, and defending the biocultural diversity of their territories of life. They support women to become stewards of their shared natural assets in order to help them build social and cultural capital. Many Women Together in Australia uses regenerative farming to highlight the critical role of Indigenous people in delivering conservation outcomes, and they really provided a fascinating insight into community-led agriculture in Australia. From the Maldives, Ocean Women connects women with water in places where they often have limited access to the power of the ocean. Coming from a background myself in community gardening, I massively endorse their philosophy that we protect what we love and we love what we know. I learned from them that 2/3 of women worldwide cannot swim, and it's hard to cultivate ocean stewardship or to encourage careers in marine conservation in people who fear drowning more than they want to plunge into the rolling surf. Bird's Eye View establishes connections between young people in two very different places, Vermont and Venezuela. They seek to improve the mental health of those young people and their educational outcomes by nurturing a shared appreciation of the migratory birds who travel between their homes. I think of this as like a massively improved version of the pen pals I had from my pre-internet school days. So for all of their diversity, there is a common thread running through all of these, that they treat problems in a joined up and integrated way. They don't separate the economic from the environmental, or treat gender discrimination as an isolated issue. Each project weaves together the well-being of the environment with that of the individuals and communities. And they are empowering. They are not educational programs teaching people how to do X, Y, or Z. They may deliver skills or build capacity, but they do so to enable autonomy and localized decision-making that will be best equipped to respond to the social and environmental challenges of the place. So how did we structure the program and what did we do to support the winners' growth? Next slide, please. The 9 were distributed across all 5 continents and were mostly women-led, and the program was split into 2 phases. The first was more cohort-based and structured around a curriculum of 8 workshops. We chose the content of those workshops according to the outcomes of our Impact Hub business diagnostic tool, which not only gave us an understanding of each organization, but asks challenging questions which enable the entrepreneur to reflect on and better understand the health of their business. So we started with a theory of change, moving on to communications and marketing, finance, impact measurement, models for scaling, and entrepreneurial well-being, among other topics. And although those are fairly standard incubator content, each one was tailored to the particular needs of the cohort, and many facilitators provided one-to-one follow-up sessions to drill down into specific challenges. Programs which provide a syllabus prior to learning about their participants can never really hope to deliver as much value as one which takes the time to interview and engage with their beneficiaries and to co-design the content iteratively with them. Impact Hub support programs often base themselves around a development plan, which we write with each participant and sign like a contract. It sets out milestones, it identifies the deliverables for all parties involved. This gives everyone a clear roadmap and keeps us accountable to each other. It's also an excellent way to onboard and brief third-party specialists who might be brought in to help create and achieve certain elements. So 3 of each of the 9 projects were allocated to each of the phase 1 hosts. For the Impact Hub 3, we matched them with local hubs in their regions to provide a more contextually relevant and tailored experience. So that meant that Kyklos was matched with Impact Hub Athens, Bird's Eye View was with Impact Hub Caracas, and Heard for Health with Impact Hub Khartoum. There's no denying it was a challenge to run a program that delivered full cohort live activities for participants in time zones from Australia to Latin America. In our desire to be inclusive, we also ran into practical barriers which may have jeopardized quality in places, which is learning that would inform any future such program. Phase 1 was very much about building foundations and providing support through a small cash injection and capacity building in the hope that fledgling organizations could find their own wings and leave the nest. But it was clear that some of the cohort were already past that level and had potential to engage at a more systemic and structural level, or to replicate their model into new geographical areas. So phase 2 abandoned the group workshops and was mainly one-to-one meetings, working through a new development plan. We also brought in third-party specialists as personal coaches, consultants for legal, branding, or impact measurement. So I'm just going to check the time, and I'm going to take this opportunity to say a little bit more about each of the 4 before I hand over to them. And you can hear in their own words, because at first glance, each of our 4 speakers today might seem to occupy quite different niches within the big tent of conservation. But from my view, in the interlocking tent of social enterprise, there are some really interesting commonalities. Heard for Health supports rural entrepreneurs to achieve better outcomes for individuals, communities, and the natural world by nurturing successful businesses and socio-cultural infrastructure in balance with local ecosystems. And Anna, as its leader, is also what we would call an intrapreneur. She's bringing entrepreneurial thinking to a large organization, supporting its evolution from within as a key way of achieving gradual, incremental change at a structural level. Project Invisibility is also innovating within huge institutional structures, in their case of academia. They also have a mission that involves shifting mindsets, encouraging people to adopt new ways of being in the hope that whole ecosystems evolve in response to new information and seeing the world through others' eyes. Kyklos, on the other hand, one of their primary markets is local government. They're operating on a more conventional business model which requires them to sell their services to institutions responsible for a specific geographic community or to secure grants that result in the same thing. Either way, they have to convince a small influential set of individuals to grant them access to a community with whom they can then work to effect systemic change at a local level, in the expectation that this acts as an example to be imitated and replicated elsewhere, thus resulting in ecosystemic shifts far greater than they could achieve alone. And lastly, human nature is also running as a business and has to engage in the usual sort of business development and sales negotiations that come with that. Like Kyklos, they have to be quite opportunistic. One day they might get a call or an email that could lead to a year-long contract with massive impact outcomes that's going to absorb huge amounts of their time. Or that email might never land and they have to go out and hustle for business, exploring new partnerships with possible allies, launching marketing campaigns, and hoping for a lucky break. But when they get it, it might well be working within those same ecosystems of the other three on the panel, universities, NGOs, or local government, trying to achieve similar goals of ecosystem evolution towards more just, inclusive, and sustainable societies. So lots in common and lots that makes each one unique. I'll hand over at this point to our first speaker, and that will be Anna Hall from Herding for Health. Just give us a moment for slide changes, and the mic is yours, Anna.
Thank you very much, Bruno. That was a great introduction, and I must say it is a real pleasure and delight to be here with everyone. It has been such a privilege to be on this learning journey with Unearthodox and Impact Hub, and I'm very excited to now share just a little snippet of that journey with you and a bit more about our program, Herding for Health. So as a brief background, and to set the context, our program, Herding for Health, is really focused in Africa, where African rangelands have supported both wildlife and livestock for thousands of years. And livestock, sorry, next slide, please. Livestock are really integral to the health and well-being of so many people across Africa, and especially rural pastoralists. So it is really focusing on, our program focuses on livestock for conservation outcomes. And some of the challenges that we are now faced, next slide, thanks, sorry, the challenges, so land use changes, poor policy, and a lack of investment into these communal rangelands in Africa have really led to multiple things, but primarily uncontrolled livestock movement, which has then led to land degradation, livestock-wildlife conflict, and poor animal health, which in turn perpetuates the cycle of degradation and conflict, and really a decline of essential ecosystem services. Next slide. So our program, Herding for Health, was really born to address these multitude of challenges in African rangelands, but in a way that was locally acceptable and in a way that ensured sustainability. So Herding for Health is really a community-driven livestock model for rangelands restoration and improved livelihoods through herding, capacity building, and collective governance. And Herding for Health touches on all of the future of conservation NGOs' themes for change. So firstly, power and legacy. We are shifting the power from global north to pastoralists and local farmers and local herders. And really, it is the farmers and the pastoralists and the herders that own Herding for Health implementation. Regarding interdependence and inclusivity, We are very much a partnership program, with our most important partners being local implementers. And we also have science, training, and enterprise partners. And key to our model is establishing strong collective governance structures. With communication and narratives, we are definitely pushing to reframe pastoralists and their livestock as a solution to conservation problems, rather than the problem. In the past, it's really been cattle and livestock and pastoralists that have been seen as causing degradation. But we are trying to shift that to show that pastoralists and their livestock are actually a solution to degradation. And lastly, operational and funding models. And this is where I really valued the journey with Unearthodox and the Innovation Challenge, where I really got to explore new operational and funding models and ways to see how we could scale in an efficient, sustainable way, and that delivered impact to the lives of the people on the ground. Next slide, thanks. So Herding for Health is very much a holistic One Health approach. And as such, we focus on ensuring impact in 4 key areas: rangelands, including biodiversity and soil carbon, so the climate aspect, livestock and wildlife. And a big factor for us is pastoralist well-being as well, income and livelihoods, and obviously governance and policy. We need strong collective governance to ensure sustainability. And in the next few years, we hope to have at least 7 million hectares restored across Africa, and at least 15,000 farmers part of the Herding for Health program, and 7,000 permanent green jobs, mostly in the form of professional herders. And we currently have a number of pilot sites across various countries in Africa, and we are looking now to transition those sites from a primarily donor-based funding model to a more sustainable market delivery to ensure long-term sustainability. Thanks, next. So to end off, just briefly, largely thanks to this journey I've been on with Unearthodox, we are growing, and so a couple of things we need from you. We are lucky to be in a position to have 3 open positions currently, and so I request that you refer strong candidates to our open positions there: the technical manager, communications and knowledge manager, and another sort of project manager role. And then I can certainly give you details afterwards. Currently, all these jobs are on Conservation International's website. And together, we could be part of a movement that puts pastoralists at the center of conservation agendas. I really invite you to join the movement to highlight the importance of healthy rangelands in achieving our global climate, biodiversity, and well-being goals. And lastly, next slide, thanks. Next slide. Lastly, just what we could do for you. If you are in Africa or want to work with pastoralists or livestock farmers, we can provide access to tools, resources, and partners to help others, including yourselves, work with pastoralists and local farmers for a more regenerative, healthier future. So thank you very much. That's, I think, my time up. I will now hand it back to Bruno.
Thanks very much, Anna. Great. As is being explained in the chat, you'll all have opportunity. We'll have a Q&A towards the end of the session. So please do put your questions in there. They'll be collated and aggregated, and you'll have plenty of time to engage with that later on. So next up, it's Samirah and Tasnim from Project Invisibility. Over to you guys.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Firstly, thank you so much, Melanie and Brian, Bruno, for kicking us off, and Anna for getting us started. I'm Samirah Siddiqui. I'm a researcher and curator living in Berlin and based between Pakistan, the UK, and Germany.
And I'm Tasnim Elboute. I work as a program manager based between Marrakesh and New York City. I'm currently managing the Morocco program for the Global Diversity Foundation.
We're the co-founders
we're the
co-founders of Project Invisibility and one of the awardees of the Unearthodox Innovation Challenge. We've had the honor of being mentored by Leonie, Bruno, Inez, and Sudha over the last year in the incubation program.
Our backgrounds are in environmental and social justice, the arts, and activism. And the Project Invisibility story really started in the university classroom. Our lived experiences between Pakistan and Morocco and our studies in the US and the UK always featured in our thinking about conservation futures. Next slide, please. During our postgraduate studies on environmental conservation, we noticed that the curricula emphasized drivers of environmental degradation, such as habitat loss and land fragmentation, but really overlooked structural and systemic causes, such as inequality and colonialism, as key drivers of modern-day conservation challenges. We noticed our professors discussed these challenges as if they occurred spontaneously, and often used vague language around violation of planetary boundaries as euphemisms for colonial activity.
Voices of those who've historically been leaders in environmental justice were absent. It's well recognized that Indigenous communities safeguard 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity, with a higher preserved biodiversity than those on non-Indigenous lands. So why are many of the ongoing approaches, such as nature-based solutions, at odds with the historical environmental approaches of Indigenous and local communities? Where are the subaltern perspectives? Next slide, please.
Our experiences in the academy showed that we live in a world where power remains fully entrenched in Eurocentric knowledge and firmly consolidated in the classroom. This sparked our passion for amplifying alternative narratives and building a community where the stories and experiences of those at the forefront of environmental change are heard. Next slide, please. And thus, building a just and equitable future for the planet through the power of storytelling has been our main motivation. Rather than being a voice for the voiceless, Project Invisibility aims to pass the mic, so to speak, to those whose voices have been unheard or silenced. Next slide, please.
To spark change, we go straight to the sites of dominant knowledge production, the university classroom. We aim to establish connections between environmental changemakers, academia, and NGOs, amplifying the voices that advocate for social and ecological justice. Next slide, please. Through the Innovation Challenge Incubation Program, Project Invisibility combines and builds from the experience of our sister organization, Project Myopia, and the Global Environments Network. At Project Myopia, we diversify university curricula through crowdsourcing material directly from students. This changes the way that curricula is designed. Project Myopia wants to see more work from the global majority that increases diversity, and that includes more women, more LGBTQ and non-binary perspectives, and disabled people. Over 5 years, we've seen an impact in pedagogical practices at the universities we work with and improving participatory methods of decolonizing the curriculum from the grassroots up.
And through our Global Environments Network, convened by the Global Diversity Foundation, we are connected to over 600 changemakers located in 85 countries around the world. These changemakers are operating at the front lines of systemic change through their positions as community organizers, researchers, students, and our engagement with the network includes various kinds of activities, from mentorship and incubation of small projects to sharing stories of transformation and practical experiences across the network. Within the Morocco program, we have GAN members working in the High Atlas of Morocco to use the High Atlas as a site to look at cultural landscapes, programming, and celebrate biocultural diversity, working on the axes of biodiversity and livelihoods. Next slide, please.
Project Invisibility uses the power of storytelling to build a just and equitable future for the planet. It will crowdsource, document, and disseminate voices from the forefront of social and ecological justice. This will collectively shift the dominant narratives in conservation discourse within academia and NGOs, and eventually in the ecosystems most impacted by these challenges. The platform will mainstream alternative stories and break down silos in academia. Ultimately, all of this will lead to a richer and more nuanced understandings and conservation practice, which is rooted in local realities rather than Western imaginations. Next slide, please.
So we have been developing our project through the incubation and mentorship of Unearthodox and Impact Hub and IUCNCs. We are working to launch our first collections very soon. The project is very close to our hearts. The first collection, titled Biodiversity and Livelihoods. I say it's really close to our hearts because the Global Diversity Foundation has been working in the Moroccan cultural landscapes of the High Atlas for over 10 years. And through our GEN network, we also have members located in other countries working on these axes. And so we're tapping into this community to share the grounded stories of working on biocultural diversity as our first set of stories. Our second collection looks to a fellowship launched by our colleagues at Ethnokino and University of Bern called the Movement Fellowship. It's a group of young changemakers who are working on a variety of social and environmental causes, and we're working with the conveners of the fellowship to feature environmental stories and help us usher in video and photo mediums as stories for the Project Invisibility platform. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we need, as I say, we are in a really key moment for our project as we gear up for launch. So we're actively growing our network and trying to reach folks to help us amplify the project. And whether that's from, institutional positions or as folks interested in these causes generally. We also have opportunities for folks to participate in focus groups. We are organizing a series of focus groups to help inform some of our platform design and longer term management of it. And lastly, we're also actively fundraising to support our platform. And so at the very high level, together we can challenge existing power dynamics and be part of a movement for change that shifts mindsets and recenters marginalized narratives. And whether it's from your position in an institution or your connection to storytellers, we really want to get to know you.
And for you, we can connect you to changemakers. We're members of a global environment network, which has 600 members across 85 different countries. And we can also advise and provide training for academic institutions and NGOs on practical implementation of decolonial methodologies and approaches to conservation. Thank you so much. I think we can hand back over to Bruno now, and we look forward to the Q&A later.
Thank you both so much. Excellent. So yeah, our third speaker is Mara from Kyklos in Greece.
Hello. First of all, I'm very happy that we're all here today, and thank you very, very much for having us with you. Thank you very much, Unearthodox, Impact Hub, for all these months of the amazing work that we did together. So I am the co-founder and the director of In Common, which is a non-profit organization in Greece that we work on circular economy through community activation. And actually, we are trying to bring the principles and the practices of circular economy into everyone's everyday life, to the everyday life of citizens, businesses, local authorities, everyone. So why? Well, this is the question. We really believe that the circular economy is maybe the only solution to the climate crisis that we all face right now, and that threatens the planet's conservation. And of course, because the cities play a huge role in that, and create such a big issue on this field of climate crisis, both on environmental and social level, we really believe that circular system and circular economy can make our cities more sustainable and the planet healthier and the people happier. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we at In Common, we work on a neighborhood level. This is because we believe that neighborhoods are the cells for more sustainable cities. And the question that we investigate and that we work on in practice is, what would a circular neighborhood look like? So actually, next slide, please. Actually, a circular neighborhood, no, the previous slide, please. Yes, thank you. Actually, a circular neighborhood would be a unit inside the urban fabric that the resources, the waste, the products, the materials, the water, the air, everything could be managed in a much better way. This is what Kyklos, our project, is working on. This is what is trying to investigate, and this is the project through which we took part in this innovation challenge. Next slide, please. So we combine circular economy with the neighborhood unit, and this is how we work on the circular neighborhood model. Kyklos project is trying and has created this model in order to be able to implement it again and again in as many as possible neighborhoods, so that we can really hope that our cities can become more sustainable. So what we say within our team, we say that a circular neighborhood, it would be it would be a unit that nothing and no one could be wasted. Next slide, please. So in reality, what we do in order to investigate this model and in order to create and to improve it is that we start from research, desk research, but also action field and participatory research. We organize community building activities. This is in order to create community around what we do, in order to promote circular economy in as many people as possible, but also in order to get feedback from the community that we work with, in order to really create this model and organize this model of circular neighborhood in a way that it could have real impact on our the community's everyday life. And of course, we have as third pillar the testing of circular economy, of circular application, which is next slide, please. Yes, which is through the participation that we have as impact, through the participative events, through the people that come, are informed and engage on a basis level to our community, is what we say the circularity applications in practice, such as a composting bin for the neighborhood, such as the library of things that everyone can come and borrow, tools in order to repair their stuff, such as the coffee recycling system that we have in our space, in order to engage more and more people. Of course, the challenge here is how we can find these funding models that are suitable for our functions, since we talk about mentality change, which is a very long-term process, and of course it needs long-term funding. This is something that we talk about a lot with the Unearthodox and the Impact Hub team. Next slide, please. So through our collaboration in this program, we had the chance to develop our theory and change, to develop further our impact measurement plan, to have a lot of crucial networking. But we believe that the most important is that we managed to create the Circular Neighborhood Toolbox, which is the first time that we talk about here in this event, and we are very happy about that. Next slide, please. So, if any local actor, or if any group of citizens, or if any local authority of a city or of a neighborhood would like to create their own neighborhood more circular, and thus their city more sustainable, this toolbox can give a detailed plan and a detailed system of steps on how this can become a reality. So you can find in there how to start, how you can create your theory of change, how you can get to know your community, how you can find your spot, and of course how you can mix and match your modules, the research, the community building, and the testing that we mentioned before, in order to create and to have the maximum impact that you could, and in order to have a circular neighborhood in reality. So next slide, please. So what we would need from you is, of course, to help us amplify the concept of circular neighborhood. This is a process that never ends. So any feedback, any idea is always welcome. And we really believe that together, all together, through collaborations, through networks, we can make a more circular future, and thus have some hope in terms of planet conservation and tackling the climate change. And of course, we as a team, through our circular economy, circular neighborhood toolbox, we can provide you with a detailed model on how your neighborhood can become more circular and thus your city more sustainable, which is the goal that we should all have. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Mara, and congratulations on the beautiful looking printed toolkit, which is the first time we've seen it as well. So that's a great joy. I look forward to exploring that more following this conference. And that leaves just one more speaker in our section, and that's Lauren Evans from Human Nature.
Thanks, Bruno. Yeah, first I'd like just to say a massive thank you to Unearthodox and to Impact Hub for the journey that we've shared this past year and all the support that you've given me. I'm going to miss it hugely. Yeah, so we built Human Nature to create a more connected conservation practice. Next slide, please. Our vision is a world in which conservation practice places people at its heart. And our mission is to improve planetary health by supporting conservationists to fully engage with and understand the people they work with and their differences, needs and values. When we applied for the Future of Conservation NGOs Innovation Challenge last year, Human Nature was a tiny seed of an idea based on discussions with my friend and colleague Fleur Nash about the challenges faced in the conservation sector and our ideas of how to transform them. Since winning the challenge, Fleur has had her son and is finishing her PhD, so I've continued to grow Human Nature alone with the support of the Innovation Challenge team and Fleur from the sidelines. And the program has helped me to grow this seed to become a company that's now up and running in Kenya. One day, potentially, I hope to set up a sort of charitable branch of the organization, which is most likely to be in the UK. And I'm currently developing, I've got some support from Unearthodox to develop the brand and the website for Human Nature. Next slide, please. So the problem that we're addressing is that conservation has come under increased scrutiny and criticism for its lack of inclusivity based on its colonial roots, asymmetrical power dynamics and history of excluding or limiting people's interactions with nature. Its focus can often be on wildlife and biodiversity rather than on the societies that it affects. Practitioners are more often than not more trained in natural science, if not wholly trained in natural science and not social science, and can often lack the skills to fully engage with people and all of their complexity. As a result, conservation practice can even exclude or negatively impact people's lives and biodiversity outcomes. Next slide, please. However, ultimately, conservation is about managing people's behavior. It's a human endeavor in terms of how people interact with nature and also how people interact with each other over nature. And both the actions and the inactions of people shape outcomes for nature. Next slide, please. So we believe that understanding and engaging with people should lie at the core of conservation. So Human Nature is a for-purpose organization that exists to support and realize this transformation in practice. Next slide, please. So we work directly with conservation organizations and practitioners to deepen their engagement with the people that they work with and practice informed, inclusive conservation that balances the needs of people and nature. And we do this in 4 main ways. The first way is by unpacking human contexts using social science research. And we focus on more qualitative approaches and concepts such as reflexivity, positionality, appreciative inquiry, all of which place the individual and their position and beliefs at the heart of any inquiry. And also political ecology, which is based on the principle that anything environmental is fundamentally and inherently political. We're also helping organizations to recognize and to value that understanding the nuance of every social context is the bedrock of any conservation intervention. And the second way we work is by facilitating empathic communication between different parties, often with very different power symmetry and very different views. So we mediate conservation conflicts, and we use tools such as nonviolent communication and restorative justice circles. The third way we work is by sharing. So we train conservationists with ways to communicate, to collaborate, to understand, and to engage with people empathically. We also develop, our fourth way of working is by developing inclusive conservation policies. Next slide, please. So currently, I am working with the Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association, which is a kind of pioneering organization in Kenya that advances the aspirations and interests of people who actually live with wildlife. It aims to kind of devolve decision-making to those landowners who live with wildlife. So I'm helping develop a policy guide to help those conservancies navigate the risks and opportunities of the rapidly evolving carbon sector in Kenya. I'm also working with Save the Elephants to understand why it is in northern Kenya that more elephants are being killed now than in the last 13 years since the poaching crisis as a result of human-elephant conflict, and to try and sort of co-create ways in which this can be mitigated. I'm also teaching empathic social sciences and nonviolent communication on master's courses in the UK and Kenya, and working currently with the Zoological Society of London to train Kenya Wildlife Service rangers how to use empathic communication and restorative justice to navigate human-wildlife conflict. And this work actually came from a specific need that was articulated by the rangers themselves, who felt ill-equipped to deal with navigating the trauma and the heat of human-wildlife conflict in Tsavo. So in terms of our impact, the nature of our work in building and changing relationships means impact measurement is mainly qualitative. So we measure impact by following up with participants, for example, in a conflict that we're mediating, on whether or not they felt that their needs were heard and included in that mediation process. Or, for example, how students feel that their skills have changed or not after our trainings compared to before. Next slide, please. So what we need from you is something quite specific, which would be the opportunity to sort of further build our evidence base and carry out a 3 to 6 month research project into the impact of using an empathic communication, restorative justice approach to address a conservation conflict. We would train and work with your team, and this would help us further build our proof of concept research. I think together we can build a movement to create a more connected, inclusive type of conservation. And in terms of what we can do for you, we could build better empathic communication and leadership in your team, which can then be shared with the people that your team works and engages with. We can help you resolve specific conservation conflicts and work through them. We can carry out context-specific social science research for you to help design or alter conservation interventions. And finally, we can teach these things on your conservation courses. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope to hear from some of you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. yeah, lot to digest and think about there as well. And that's going to be a perfect opportunity for all 4 of our speakers to be spotlit, I believe. And we're going to move on to questions from the audience, which we encourage more people to provide in the chat. I do have our first one, which is specifically for the Project Invisibility team, who hopefully can come back on camera. Lovely. And you may see it in the chat, but I'll read it out for those who can't, which is the following: that marginalized narratives need to get to the power brokers. In what innovative ways does Project Invisibility proactively recenter these narratives to those power brokers, many of which are colonially educated, and at worst, they see these narratives as being against their privileged interests? So a lot to unpack there. I leave it to you to respond.
Yeah, this is a really, really great question. And we completely agree with this point that we need to engage directly with power brokers if our aim is to challenge power dynamics and change which narratives are centered. And this was a big debate amongst us because we maintain that the academy is still our main target. And we kept our engagement with academia central to the project, even if our main aim or motivation is kind of beyond the university space. But challenging university curricula and prompting change from the bottom up is not new to us. And engaging with folks who might be hesitant or not likely maybe to see the value in this recentering is not new to us. Samirah, if you want to chat a bit about Project Myopia experience.
Of course, this is a parallel challenge for Project Myopia, where we crowdsource curricula directly from students and their personal stories. So in a way, we're not, although it's completely important to engage with power brokers, we're not waiting for them. Project Myopia was student powered, and it challenged the curriculum and changed it from the bottom up. And we're hoping to replicate that in Project Invisibility by amplifying and passing the mic.
Great. Thank you very much, both. We may get further follow-up on that. I'm going to move to a second, quite different type of question, which is actually more directed at the host organizations, which is about, will there be a call for an upcoming innovation challenge? I can say something on behalf of Impact Hub, but I'll let Mel or someone else from the Unearthodox team respond to that question about a potential future innovation challenge.
Great, thank you, Bruno. And I love that people are enthusiastic, looking for the next innovation challenge. That's positive for me. What is happening at the moment is this Learning Fest is celebrating and closing and sharing learning from the last 3 years of work that we've been working on. So we're moving into our next phase of the innovation portfolio. So you can look out in the next kind of 12 months for the next innovation call that we'll likely run for the next set of themes and the processes. We're going to be opening up our co-creation, revisiting problems, revisiting the future, and connecting new streams of innovation to the next part of the portfolio. So I would say stay in touch with our website, stay in touch with our social media channels, and it will be, in the near to mid future for that. So just stay in touch. And Bruno, from your point of view?
Yeah, sure. The Impact Hub runs almost 100 translocal innovation programs every year across the world, usually focusing on a very specific region or topic. It might be a vertical, like circularity, or it might be something more horizontal, like empowering female entrepreneurs. And they're often, so I can't really tell you what's coming up because there's just too many to count. The best thing to do is to identify your closest Impact Hub or Impact Hubs. There's over 110 around the world. You can use impacthub.net, I believe, is the main parent website. There should be a map there. You can contact us through social media, which I believe will be trailed in Unearthodox social media. So there's always a lot going on, and hopefully there's something for you and your community. I another question, sort of combining one I wanted to ask with something which has been asked in the chat. Someone asked about the most fulfilling aspect of your work so far. And I was going to ask to hear a story that brings you joy from your work. So those are two very similar things. And I open that up to the floor for someone to tell us about what the most fulfilling part of their work has been recently. I'm going to nominate someone unless you speak. Lauren, go ahead.
I mean, I think the most fulfilling part for me has been sort of learning about this non-violent communication side of things and a different way of communicating. So I'm beginning to trial that in practice, and obviously I'm learning as well. I think it takes years to actually become a certified trainer. But just to give a snippet, is I did a 10-day intensive training in non-violent communication, and it was 90 people from something like 30 different African countries, many of which had gone through serious sort of trauma and conflict. And what I found amazing was the ability of a tool like non-violent communication to sort of cut through different backgrounds, different experience, different biases, to help all of us identify the kind of universal needs and the universal feelings, well, that were universal to all of us. And yeah, I think the thing that's making me happiest now is actually being able to put that into practice in a conservation conflict and see how transformative it can be. That's it.
Lovely, thank you. Can anyone else bring something to this question? Anna?
I can briefly, thank you. From a slightly different perspective, and Lauren, I love that. I'd love to dig deeper into that sometime. The non-violent, need to understand that a bit more and learn from you. But from my perspective, I think recently what has really brought me joy is going into the communities that we work in. And traditionally, we've started with sort of donor funding, traditional NGO donor funding to start these projects, but then seeing these communities start putting in their own money and resources because they understand the benefits of sort of managing their cattle better and managing the rangelands, and sort of seeing the sort of realizing that their traditional ways that there's elders used to farm, and when they kept grazing areas rested, and those sort of traditional stories that have been passed down, that they actually have so much value. And if they sort of go back to some of those traditional practices with a bit more combined with some innovative technology, that it's actually really worthwhile, and they're willing to come in and fund themselves and work together to improve their communal rangelands. So yeah, that's just what has brought me joy recently.
Lovely. And Mara, I think you were going to go next.
Yes. Very quickly, I was thinking that the most joyful times that we have in Kyklos and in common in general is where some group of some people from our community, they just come to us out of the blue, and they make some actions that they really prove that there is a real impact, that we can bring the change through our work, because we are in our everyday lives, we are so much into it that we cannot realize it. So when a community member comes and says, in terms of the circular application that has to do with the coffee recycling, I didn't only bring my coffee waste from my building that it's 200 meters, but I also brought my sister, who lives in another city in Greece, and I felt that it would be very important for me, instead of throwing it to the landfill, to bring it here. And this is a member of Kyklos community. I mean, this is something very important, and gives us hope that there are things that can change. So I would say all these moments that come out of the blue from our community members.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely endorse that from my time as a community gardener. You're right. It's pretty hard sometimes to lift up and look at the creation around you rather than just worrying about, when it's next going to rain or whatever else your local problems might be. So celebrating success and having that being brought by someone else unexpectedly, serendipitously, is always such a joy. Yeah, I really resonate with that. Project Invisibility, would you like to say anything in response to this?
Yeah, I think one of the most fulfilling and joyful parts of our work so far has been defining our first thematic collections and deciding to go with, the biodiversity and livelihoods theme, which is so close to our hearts, but also expanding it to connections with our colleagues at Ethno-Pinot and University of Bern to really find an answer to how we were going to be bringing narratives of different formats into our platform. So it's been really exciting to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of how exactly to launch our process that we're gearing up for.
Fantastic. Thank you. Samirah, I don't know if you want to add anything. I'm just picking my next question. All good? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So let's I'm gonna ask, I've got one or two things for you, Lauren, at Human Nature in particular, which are quite specific. So, and there may be other people that can comment on this, but first of all, is there a methodology or a network which monitors the shift of conservation NGOs at different levels in their movement towards more consideration of human nature in their work? Is there this overarching lens which allows us to see the evolution of the ecosystem?
Not to my knowledge, but I mean, it might well exist. If it does, I'd really love someone to tell me about it because it'd be fascinating. But I think it's something that we're talking about. I don't actually know if Fleur's joined today, but she was hoping to. But we were hoping to do a bit more sort of postdoctoral research into that, into sort of looking at the shift towards more compassionate conservation across the board in terms of practice, but also in terms of thought leadership and research. So, I mean, part of that process would be identifying what's out there already. But yeah, I don't know. But if anyone else knows more, please tell me, because that'd be great.
Yeah, I think for me, the question that question raises is, how does one measure this? What are our indicators? And agreeing on a common language is one of the most challenging things. In environmental, it's contested, isn't it? In environmental conservation, people don't always agree on what they should measure. But in the human side of things, it's even harder for us to set up a common framework of impact. And that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges facing our broad movement as a whole, so that we can talk about what progress means in the same terms and not constantly be caught up in debates about whether this really counts as success or not. And so, Lauren, as well, from someone who also works in Kenya and is piloting inclusive models in conservation tourism, they point out that technical assistance and access to suitable finance can really help in creating change, but are presumably in short supply. Is there any initiative addressing these constraints, the lack of technical assistance and the lack of access to suitable finance?
Again, I'm not sure, like, if I can equivocally say what's happening in, overall in Kenya, but I do know there's a massive project that's upcoming that's kind of being led by the Nature Conservancy. And actually they've brought in Sustain East Africa, who Human Nature works with, to help with this. But it's looking at all of Kenya's conservancies and all of the top tourism operators within those conservancies to look at the social impact and look at the biodiversity impact that's being had as a conservancy, but also as a tourism operator, with a view to help direct conservation finance to those areas of greatest need to have the greatest social and ecological impact. But I'd be happy for that person. I can see the name's not clear in the chat, but to get in touch and we can talk a bit further about that.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of others that are directed at specific people. So again, well, Mara from Kyklos and In Common, I'm gonna combine two things and hopefully not make it too confusing. But there's interest in establishing what makes your circularity model unique and different from, for example, programs like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and to what role do animals in your neighborhoods? What role do animals play, large and small? Yeah, that's also come up, both of which interest me as well.
Okay, very interesting questions, both of them. In terms of the innovation, if we could say, or the difference of our project, first of all, let me tell you that we really believe that even if the same project is being implemented in different areas, regions, countries, whatever, it could be a completely different project. And unfortunately, in Greece and or maybe in general in Balkans, we know that in terms of circularity, things are so closely to 0.0 that even something from abroad, if could be implemented with no innovation, it could be still useful. Although what is the difference between such programs you mentioned and Kyklos is the fact that we do work with the community on a local and small scale level. We do work with the neighborhood. We go outside to the streets, we work with them, we get feedback from the community, from citizens, businesses, schools, teachers, educators, local authorities, anyone. We work on a daily basis based on their real needs, or at least on how we read them, and we put into practice the circularity applications that I mentioned before. Is exactly this detail that we test in reality and in the community's everyday life, how a circular system could work, and thus we get impact, we get results, we improve what we have to improve, we adjust what we have to adjust. So it is a real field work combined with scientific work that is being done towards the circular neighborhood. So this is the innovation, and this is the model that we propose through our circular neighborhood toolbox as well. I don't know if I've covered you on this, Bruno. And in terms of animals, smaller or bigger, that you asked, very interesting. Everything in nature and in both natural and built environment, everything is connected, even if we cannot see the connection. So, for example, if we don't have there is a big conversation around public water, which is an issue that has to do with circular economy a lot. In Greece, we don't have almost non-public water in the public space, etc. And during the summer, last summer we had 43 degrees. I mean, for 2-3 weeks in a row. So this, how is connected with the animals? I think, I don't even need to answer on that. We really feel that managing our resources in the best possible way for the pets, but also for the insects, for the biodiversity of our cities is super important in order to be able to keep this balance in the planet. And cities has a huge role on that. They also they take huge place on Earth on that. So of course it's connected with everything, both for small and bigger animals. If I haven't covered you, please ask me more.
Excellent, thank you very much. Yeah, there's a specific comment that I know Lauren would like to respond to. Lauren, you can read it. Do you want to read it out, and or I can do it if you want. So I wasn't sure, but it's about that reporting on impact is also a construct of northern donors and intermediary organizations, but this is the comment that you asked to respond to. Yeah, exactly. But that maybe on the ground, people have different ways of viewing success, their own versions of impact.
No, I just found that a really, really crucial comment. And I think it's really, really important. And it's in this personal journey, the way human nature's evolved is, I think, often when it comes to kind of impact measurement, I think it kind of makes people's heads sort of explode a little bit, because it's not so, the indicators aren't so clear. But I think, again, like evolving what success means to something that's not confined within our sort of box ticking mentality, I think is really important. Like, I think I mentioned it about the sort of more qualitative approach to measuring impact. Like if you're talking about trying to address and hear and understand people's like true like underlying needs in a conservation organization, in a conservation intervention, like even if it's really polarized between two sides, it's not just, I don't know, I just feel like a number of people who've been involved in some sort of intervention, like an impact measurement of action is just a bit meaningless. But if there's a way of kind of qualitatively understanding if people feel like their needs have been met, or at least heard and included in a decision-making process, that's crucial. And I'd love to, like, if anyone has any other thoughts on how that can be done, because, I think that qualitative, slightly open-ended way of assessing impact is really important. So any other thoughts on that, I'd really appreciate.
Anyone from the group want to talk about? Yeah, Anna.
I guess just as a sort of very tangible example in our specific Herding for Health program, similarly, we first went in thinking to measure sort of the impact on livelihoods and well-being, would measure income from livestock sales as well as tourism. That was a good impact measurement. But then actually sort of talking to communities and in different areas, we realized some areas actually, the value, the cultural value of livestock and cattle was outweighed the income value. So then, we had to shift how we actually measure that value and show progress towards sort of improved cultural fit and cultural well-being. It's an ongoing journey. We don't quite know exactly how best to illustrate that impact. So if anyone else has ideas, it would be great. But it definitely getting ideas from the communities is helpful.
Anyone else on this? Okay, now things are flowing in thick and fast. We've got about 10 minutes left before we're going to wrap up, and I'm almost drowning in questions here. But directed towards Lauren and Anna, how do you plan to move towards communities designing and leading conservation, not just as participants in a conservation program? Let's just start with that one, moving towards communities designing and leading conservation. Anna, do you want to go?
Yeah. Go for it, Lauren, if you had something you're about to say. Sorry.
No, you go for it, Anna. You've probably done it more than I have.
No, just great question. And I think it is difficult. I think, again, and I'm looking forward to the next learning sort of phase on the future of philanthropy and donor, the environment that these NGOs and large organizations work in terms of the donor landscape often dictates how things are implemented and doesn't provide that flexibility and time to rather have things driven and owned by communities and participants. So more and more we're trying to look at diversified funding models and rather trust communities more and let them generate their own funding so they can implement and own sort of the way they want to, and rather be there as not a supply but a demand. The community demand input from us rather than we supply input. And I think that's the sort of mindset change I'm trying to push for in large NGOs. Have the sort of resources that others can tap into when there's demand, rather than supplying when we feel like there should be.
Can I follow on from that, Bruno? Yeah, just I think again it's a really, really good question. And I think I think I've had experience in Kenya. Kenya has a pretty fraught history. It's got a pretty colonial history of especially up in northern Kenya. And a lot of powerful actors do make most of the decisions. And I think, I don't know, you can't generalize, but quite a lot of people have felt incredibly marginalized and disenfranchised because of those decisions that have been made in the past and that continue to be made in a similar way. I think trust it's a really, really important question. Like, how on earth do you rebuild trust in some places where people might have heard the same old promises and had various conservation interventions forced on them? I mean, maybe I'm an idealist, and maybe that's okay, because maybe you sometimes need a bit of that. But I really hope that a different way of engaging can help people to build trust again. And I think absolutely the most crucial part of that is co-creating solutions. And I think maybe I didn't articulate that well enough actually in the way I talked about human nature, because I think social research is one thing, but I guess research has quite an extractive connotation, that you're like doing it for some purpose of just generating knowledge. But I think social research to be able to inform and co-create solutions that are relevant for everyone involved in that practice, particularly for those people actually living on the ground who are affected by an intervention. Thanks for that question.
Yeah.
Jump in on,
Go for it. Yeah, Tasnim.
just because it's relevant to our biodiversity and livelihoods collection. We have a few again members who have been working on conservation projects at length. My point here is that I think time is a really defining factor in building trust, and allows you to engage and have partnerships in different modalities. Because you mentioned here, how do you move towards communities designing and leading conservation, not just being a partner or a participant in a pre-designed program or in a program that gets designed, top down. One of the things that we've gained from working in the High Atlas for so long is really following the lead of communities. We've been able to see a really big jump from communities forming in associations versus in cooperatives, community-led cooperatives who are really driving job creation and rural economy of the High Atlas. And when you enter and collaborate with a community with a network that is not designed by you, that makes a really big difference. So being able to honor exactly the kind of way you engage rather than attempting to build projects from the bottom up has been a really big shift for us, and really valuable in building our trust, because that way when you're investing or doing these projects in collaboration with different partners, it's not just a commitment to individuals, but it's a commitment to the networks that are already being created with or without you. So there's an embedded kind of sustainability there. And I think being able to have the luxury of time and really spend time building trust and then following the lead of which interventions are being proposed and supporting those rather than coming in with ideas that are solutions is really important.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much for those responses. There are lots more questions that I wish we could get to. There's a common theme coming through a lot of them. And I'll have to ask that maybe only one or two people speak, and do so briefly, around interacting with, working with, and changing power brokers, agents of power, often with unsatisfactory track records. How would you recommend engaging with these organizations, individuals? Yes. Anyone who feels willing to deal with that thorny issue.
Maybe I can get us started. This is a big question. In the case of Project Invisibility, we're seeing, the academy as like a space of power, right? In that it maintains certain standard in conservation master's degrees or courses that students are leaving with specific ideas about what conservation challenges are and how they might contribute to them, or what the appropriate way to be working on them is. And so for us, it's really important that we're directly engaging with that entity as a power broker. But I would also argue that there are cases that power brokers are not necessarily like challenging them is important, but that there's not necessarily that's the one path. In the case of our high atlas programming, for example, that will feature in our first collection, actually the work of revitalizing traditional practices of conservation can really happen out of sight and out of the attention of major governance institutions, or those we might consider the power brokers in that context. So for us, it's really important that we're facing power brokers within the academy kind of head on, because we need them as partners, right? There's going to be that challenge, and the welcoming of different narratives in classrooms, that has to be done in collaboration. But I think for some of us or some of our projects, this is not necessarily a must for our program design.
So there's time for one more quick word from someone in response to that, or I can lead to the wrap up. Anna.
Quick word. I agree. And I think for me, two things. One is getting support from others. Join sort of a community of practice so you don't feel so alone when you're trying to approach these power brokers. And secondly, look for those champions. Often there are one or two champions in these institutions that are higher up or can start, nudging at the cracks. And if you can find those individuals and really work with them, often you can get further down the line.
I think that's an excellent piece of advice about finding allies. And so thank you, everyone, for participating. I'm going to hand back to Mel simply to draw your attention to the chat again. There is a feedback survey there. And it's been a pleasure. There's more questions. There's more discussion. Please join us on social media. Please come to the following next two events. But that's all from me. And Melanie, over to you.
Thank you, Bruno. Thank you to our wonderful panelists and to everyone who submitted applications to the Innovation Channelist and the wider 9 group of 9 who aren't all here today. I could say so many things, and the questions were starting to get exciting and dynamic and targeted and a bit salty. So it was really good. I don't know if everyone knows that phrase, to be a bit salty, but it was nice. What shall I say beyond the thank yous? First of all, we're going to be sharing a survey in the chat for people to fill in about their experience with the webinar today. And we'd really appreciate, a couple of minutes of your time just to fill this in and let us know what you thought. 1, so we can do better. 2, so we can understand how this work is landing with people. It's really invaluable for us to improve. I'd really like to encourage you to not only sign up for the next learning events that we're sharing, the next one is the 17th of October, but share out the links to the other resources that are coming, the other webinars, the other panel sessions that we're going to be running with your networks, with your friends, maybe with people you just want to nudge in a particular direction and see if they would like to learn something or hear something different. And then I would really just like to close with, I'm going to use my closing statement just to reflect on something. Many years ago, someone challenged me and said, I don't believe that innovation can be positioned at long-term durable change. I think it's about shallow things and making small changes. It's this flashy kind of buzzword. And I actually think that the panelists today, the work that they're doing, prove that vastly wrong. Innovation can be positioned at deep social change, deep change between the relationships between people and nature and all around the world. And the wonderful thing about innovation and working in partnerships with people like Impact Hub and setting up these frames from the point of Unearthodox is that we don't know what the alternatives will be. We don't know what the solutions will be. We leave that up to the innovators to tell us from their places, their perspectives, their worlds, their contexts. Here's how I see the world differently, and here's how I will make it real. And so that's it from me. You can tell I've been very inspired, very excited again to hear from these wonderful people doing brilliant things. I wish them much luck. They're courageous, they are brave, they are taking the world in their hand, and we can all be inspired by this. So thank you very much to everyone who attended. We look forward to seeing you again at further webinars.
Thank you.